I want to be candid with you for a moment. Lately, my mental health has been struggling, and I know I'm not the only one. I found it difficult to stay motivated with my schoolwork while the pandemic still rages on, leaving me cooped up in my apartment. It can be difficult to speak out about your mental health, especially for men under the guise of toxic masculinity. We naturally discover ways to cope as an alternative, and my coping mechanism is quietly retreating into movies. Now that Thanksgiving is over, I've been leaning pretty heavily on one of my favorite holiday films, 1987's Lethal Weapon. It's been a staple of my holiday lineup for years, but this most recent viewing struck me in a profoundly different way. Hi, I'm Noah Zahradnik, and this week on Real Talk, I'd like to explore how Lethal Weapon tells men that it's okay to struggle mentally, and how important it is to reach out for help.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
He said it! He said it!
And now, our feature presentation.
In case you haven't figured out, we're going to be discussing mental health, depression, and suicide this week. It's a rough topic for some folks, so don't be afraid to bow out. I understand completely. Of all of the buddy cop blockbusters of the 1980s, Lethal Weapon is among the highest revered, and for good reason. Audiences fell in love with its saturated colors, jazzy soundtrack, and profanity-ridden dialogue. But at the center of it all was a beautiful chemistry between two leading men, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. I, of course, am guilty of such admiration of the franchise. However, much like our previous discussion about First Blood, I want to explore an aspect of Lethal Weapon that flies largely under the radar. For those who are unfamiliar, the film follows LA homicide detectives Roger Murtaugh and Martin Riggs, played by Glover and Gibson respectively. The duo are partnered up and tasked with investigating the murder of a prostitute, who also happens to be the daughter of Murtaugh's old Vietnam buddy. As they dig deeper, they uncover a drug smuggling front that's been operating since the war ended. One thing leads to another, and soon the two are tasked with taking down the whole operation. Not a completely original idea, but it was one of the first of its kind. It sounds cliche today, but it's a lot of fun, trust me. Well, it's a lot of fun in the right mindset. If you would have asked me last Christmas how to categorize Lethal Weapon, I would have called it an action comedy, a buddy cop flick through and through. This year, though, I'd answer differently. Within that buddy cop flick is an emotionally raw and unique arc for a male character, at the time at least. Mel Gibson and his portrayal of Martin Riggs was excruciatingly tough for me to watch this year, as it depicts a man seeped in depression, quietly suffering, and I couldn't help but see a little bit of myself in there. The film opens with 3 scenes that give us a glance at a typical day for Riggs. We first see him at home, a trailer parked on an LA beach. It's morning, maybe 7 or 8 o'clock. Martin is lying in bed with his forearm covering his eyes and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. At first, you might wonder how long he's been up to already be smoking, but as he staggers out of bed, we see that his ashtray is filled up, his television is turned on, and his front door is wide open. Seeing this, I'm not asking myself how long he's been awake, but instead, did he ever fall asleep? Not long after, we get to see Martin on the job. He's working a drug bust that ends up going south pretty quickly.
Now that's a real badge, I'm a real cop, and this is a real fucking gun.
A shootout ensues, and the final goon takes Riggs hostage against the other officers. The standoff is in a stalemate, but Riggs breaks loose and turns the gun on his captor.
Get him out of there. Riggs! It ain't worth it, man.
And Martin does nothing but stand there, seething. Crossfade into that night. Riggs is back at home. He sits on the couch, drinking a beer with one hand and holding his Beretta in the other. In his lap sits a photo from his wedding day. Bugs Bunny cartoons are on the television. Tears form in his eyes as he pulls a bullet from his pocket and loads it into the chamber of his pistol. Locked and loaded, he flicks off the safety and presses the barrel to his forehead. He grits his teeth like he wants to do it, but he can't. Riggs is crying now, opting instead to stick the gun into his mouth. He sits there, fiddling with the trigger, trying to do it, before finally spitting it out. He holds up the picture frame to his face.
I miss you.
So, now we know why. His wife is dead.
I'll see you later.
These three opening scenes establish the basis for Riggs in the mind of the audience. He's unstable, erratic, alone, and above all, depressed. As a viewer, you can't help but feel sympathetic towards Martin. He clearly needs help, but he doesn't have anybody to turn to. Perhaps most impactful for me is how Riggs seems to cope with his depression, his television. Not only is Martin's set turned on in every scene at his house, his dialogue is littered with references to classic television, even in the sequels. He uses Three Stooges-style slapstick on the drug dealers before to antagonize them, and he spouts out this line in Lethal Weapon 2.
Eeny, meeny, miny.
It's pretty clear that Martin, much like myself, uses motion pictures as an escape from the real world. Now, after that fiasco with the drug bust, Riggs' lieutenant doesn't want him working alone anymore, hence the transfer to the homicide department and his assignment with Murtaugh.
Hey, look, friend, let's just cut the shit. Now, we both know why I was transferred. Everybody thinks I'm suicidal, in which case I'm fucked and nobody wants to work with me. Or they think I'm faking to draw a psycho pension, in which case I'm fucked and nobody wants to work with me.
Guess what?
What?
I don't want to work with you.
While out investigating leads on their case, the duo respond to a call about a possible jumper at an office building nearby. Martin volunteers to try and talk the subject down, so he heads up to the roof and climbs out onto the ledge with the guy.
You know, you're not the first guy to think of this, you know? A lot of people have got problems, especially during the silly season like now. You know shit! No, you're wrong, pal, you're wrong.
After appealing to the man, Riggs attaches himself to the guy with a pair of cuffs and tosses away the key.
You coming in? Come on, I'm going in. Fuck you! I'm jumping! Do you really want to jump? Do you wanna? Well, then that's fine with me. Come on, let's do it, asshole. Let's do it.
They dive off of the roof and into an inflatable airbag, surviving the fall. Now, Murtaugh is unimpressed and drags Riggs away from the scene to get some answers.
No bullshit. You want to kill yourself? Oh, for Christ. Shut up! Yes or no? You want to die? Oh, what do you want to hear, man? Do you want to hear that sometimes I think about eating a bullet? Well, I do.
Murtaugh still isn't convinced, so he offers his gun to Martin, provoking him to shoot himself. Riggs pulls back the lever and puts the barrel under his chin. But just before he can pull the trigger, Murtaugh grabs the pistol and yanks it away.
You're not trying to draw a psycho pension. You really are crazy.
Only now, after pushing his partner to the edge, does Murtaugh fully understand Riggs' mental state. The two continue to pursue their case leads, Murtaugh being particularly observant of Riggs along the way. After a long day of police work, Murtaugh invites Martin over for dinner with his family. At first, you can see Riggs is uncomfortable. He's a little bit awkward, not really knowing how to exist in a household setting like this. It takes a while, but he does eventually settle in. After dinner, the duo share a couple of beers before Riggs heads home.
You got a hell of a nice family there.
Now just bear with me, because this is a deep cut. There's a deleted scene after Riggs drives off that shows him soliciting a prostitute.
$100. What'd you have in mind?
Well, I want you to come home and watch television with me.
That's all?
Yeah, Three Stooges are on in about 20 minutes, you know.
I argue that this is a huge turning point for Martin. After being alone for so long, the experience of having dinner with the Murtaughs reminds him of what he's been missing: companionship. Instead of ignoring Riggs' mental turmoil, Murtaugh embraces it. He sees something in Martin that others in the police department might not. A damn good cop.
Every single day I wake up and I think of a reason not to do it. Every single day. And you know why I don't do it? This is going to make you laugh. You know why I don't do it? The job. Doing the job. Now that's the reason.
Murtaugh sees value in Riggs' life, even if Riggs himself doesn't. So, Murtaugh does what he can. He harbors Martin under his wing, keeping him safe and accounted for. He introduces Riggs to his family, sharing their compassion and love with him. On a larger scale, I'd argue that Murtaugh wants to give Riggs a reason to live, and the relationship that's forged between them does exactly that. Martin soliciting the prostitute indicates that this worked. He no longer wants to be alone, perhaps even that he didn't want to leave the Murtaughs in the first place. Regardless though, Riggs no longer wants to indulge in the escapism of his television, but instead share the entertainment of it with somebody else. For the remainder of the film, Riggs and Murtaugh are inseparable. When things get personal and Murtaugh's daughter becomes entwined in the plot, Riggs is just as concerned as his partner is, because the Murtaughs are his family too. You could compare their relationship to a father-son dynamic, but I always view it as more of a brotherly bond. As they grow closer together, they develop this sort of unspoken communication. Like in Lethal Weapon 2, when Murtaugh first says, "I love you."
Mart, what?
I know.
Oh. Ain't it, man?
I hear you.
Yeah, that little twang was it, but they both knew what that meant. The real draw of the Lethal Weapon films is this beautiful relationship. It resonates with the audience so powerfully that most people are willing to forgive the shortcomings of Lethal Weapons 3 and 4 just to spend more time with this pair. This year in particular, it resonated especially deep with me. I've been struggling mentally for a while now. Not quite to the severity of Riggs, but I'm willing to admit that I've had plenty of late nights this semester aimlessly watching Looney Tunes and longing to be with somebody who can't be here. Words cannot express how much I miss my family, or my partner and her family, or my professors, or my peers on campus, or even Iowa City as a whole. Seeing Martin grapple with his loss, retreating into his television, and, well, I mean, it's kind of weird to say, but the way that he finds salvation in the Murtaughs reminds me that it's okay to feel the way that I do. Anybody in this situation would feel this way, but I can't fight it alone. For anybody, not just me, but for anybody, going mano a mano with their mental health can be, in a word, lethal.
He said it! He said it!
Thank you for listening to this week's Real Talk. If you enjoyed our discussion, please consider subscribing wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Next week, I want to keep this holiday high going, so we'll be taking a look at Die Hard, or rather, one of its sequels, and how provocative it is in 2020. I sincerely hope that you don't miss it.